Well, it's the morning of June the 26th in 2003,
Yes.
and we're here with Grandma Carpenter in her home in Platteville. And you've lived here since, what, 1979, right?
About 23 years.
Mm-hmm. And this was been the longest time I think you've ever lived in one house, isn't it?
Very true.
Mm-hmm. And you grew up on a farm outside of Palmyra?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. How was farm life in those days?
It was always a very quiet life
Uh-huh.
compared to what it is now. You know, we'd gather around the table 3 times a day
Mm-hmm.
and we'd converse, and after we'd eat, my dad would talk to the boys, and like in the morning when we lived on the farm, he'd tell them what to do. He'd say, Ted, today you have to go and cultivate that, 40 acres or whatever it is, and they would not say, what do you mean?
Mm-hmm.
And you just did it. That was
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
We knew what we had to do, and that was it.
What were some of the chores you and your sisters had to do?
I don't think I hardly ever did any chores, 'cause I was the youngest one.
Uh-huh.
No, I didn't.
Did you have electricity or running water in your house?
No.
Uh-huh. So what type of, your mom had a big stove though, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that was a wood stove?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did she spend a lot of time cooking? I suppose for a big family she'd have to, right?
Yes, right. And then in the wintertime, we lived in the kitchen all the time till at night after the men got through milking. Then we could go in the front room because we didn't heat that all the time. So that
Mhm.
was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But my mother did a lot of cooking. She made her own bread and all that stuff. But when as I was growing up, I mean, we all gathered around the table and conversed and so forth and so on.
Mm-hmm. And your dad was a German, is that right?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
born in Germany.
Was he pretty stern?
Well, we knew what we could get by with, I think. He always threatened Willie that he didn't behave himself, he was gonna fix him or give him a licking or something.
Uh-huh.
But I got close to lickings, that's for sure.
Uh-huh.
But I was the baby of the family.
Mm-hmm.
And if I couldn't have my own way about things, then I would go in this, as you go down the basement, there was kind of a place where you hang your clothes. I would go in there and I would cry.
Oh.
And all the while I cried, I stamped my feet, just constantly. I wanted my own way, and the boys used to tease me sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Didn't your father, he sometimes would bring home candy?
Oh yes.
What would happen then?
Well, anyway, if you bought from groceries then you'd get a sack of candy. And in our front room we had kind of a clothes closet where he hung his clothes, and suit and whatever it was. And he'd always take that sack of candy and put it in this one of these, what do you call it, bathrobes, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so every night we were allowed one piece of candy.
Mm-hmm.
But he would sometimes be kind of slow about, giving us this piece of candy. So I remember what I did. I went and I banged against this clothes closet so he would notice it. And then we each got our candy and then we had to go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
He'd say, go to bed. And then we would go to bed.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a record player, a Victrola?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't out all the time. See, that was underneath a stand in the living room.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were gathered around and my dad got up and it was in a box.
Mm-hmm.
And then my dad, oh God, we got so excited and my dad would get that box out. We're going to play records. So anyway, then he would take it out and he'd put it on the stand, and then we play the same old records all the time.
Uh-huh.
And that was the big thing then.
Mm-hmm. And did you get a radio later on?
Oh yes.
When you got electricity in the house?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I remember going in the living room, which we didn't go in there at all in the wintertime or hardly in the summertime either. But I remember you didn't play the radio real loud. I remember my mother, when I would go in that living room accidentally, she would have her ear practically to the radio.
Mm-hmm.
So it really wasn't loud.
Mm-hmm. But your dad liked to listen to the fights, huh?
Oh yes, that was the time we had it with Gene Tierney or all this,
Gene Tunney?
Yeah, Tunney, and anyway, then my brother would have to take the battery to town and have it charged to get ready for the big night.
Oh my.
We had to fight.
Uh-huh. How did you meet Grandpa?
I met him through my sister. See, my sister married Otto.
Grandpa's brother.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I went down there, and there was Al.
Mm-hmm.
And so first Elma and Otto lived with with his folks. Later on, they got an apartment uptown, and I went there one day, and there was Alvin. So then we went for a walk that night, kicking leaves. It was kind of fall of the year, so that's how I met him.
Mm-hmm. And how long did you know him before you got married?
Oh, maybe a year or so, something like that.
And he was what, only 17 when you got
Yes,
married,
he was.
wasn't he?
Yes.
You robbed the cradle, didn't you?
Crazy.
Well, things were different then, though. Times were different.
Right. We didn't have to get married. I mean, it just did.
Yeah.
His folks were going to annul the marriage, and my dad was mad, and he wanted us to marry a nice farmer, but we didn't do that. So. But anyway, after Al got working for the railroad, then my dad accepted him, and my mother thought the world of him.
Now, this was during the Depression that you got married, right?
Yeah, I guess it was.
Things were pretty tough then, weren't they?
Oh my gosh, yes. I don't know what we ever ate sometimes.
Didn't you go like a whole winter or something with just potato pancakes or something like that?
Not a whole winter, no. But anyway, to earn some money, I used to clean like 14 rooms for this doctor a week, and we owed him money for having Sandra, so that's the way I paid for it. So I cleaned every week 14 rooms, and I got $2, and she took $1 away from me for the bill, and then I got $1.
Wow.
And then I used to iron for him because he was a doctor. And I would iron maybe from 8 o'clock to 3 in the afternoon, and then I would get another $1 for myself and $1 off the bill till I had it paid.
What was it like during the war? There was rationing and everything, wasn't there?
Yeah, we lived in Janesville. And Al walked to work every day to the depot, so we'd have enough money, or whatever you call that, so we could go home.
Your rationing coupons for gas, huh?
We'd save those, so we went home once a month or something like that. And other than that,
didn't you used to listen to the news on the radio and how the announcer would sometimes say there was bad news tonight or something like that?
Yeah, there was an announcer, I can't think of his name, but that's what he did, bad news tonight. And then we get the paper, and then it would show how Germany was moving in on other countries and everything. We really didn't know that everything was going on the way we heard later on.
Now, Grandpa didn't he didn't get into the Army then because of his railroad job, right?
He wanted to, but they thought it was more important right here.
He had some brothers, though, that went, didn't they?
Oh, yes. Charles went, and Richard went, and I think that was it, though.
Wasn't there a time when Grandpa thought he was going to get called up anyway?
Probably.
Yeah. I think he remembered saying something to me about toward the end of the war he thought he'd get called up. And
he was ready to go.
But he had a real important job.
Yes, he did. Yeah. It was very important because he had a lot of trains going through, and a lot of the soldiers and all things like that. That he used to be really, really busy at night. Troop trains, they call them.
Yeah.
And a lot of times he had to change the telegraph to get when the train came in, how you have to change things, Yeah, but he never, all the years he worked for the railroad, I think it's 32 or 35 years, he never had one accident happen.
Wow.
And in Janesville at the wartime, I mean, if you switched those rails wrong, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Very, very important. And sometimes he had to change them, I don't know how many times, in the troop train to go through.
Do you remember the end of the war? Do you remember anybody celebrating?
Not really.
And then he came to Platteville.
We moved so many times, 19 times.
19.
Let me see, where'd we go? I think we moved to Whitewater. And then I think we moved to Judah, Wisconsin. Then we moved back to Janesville. And then we moved back to Palmyra, where he's a depot agent. And then we moved, let's see, I just can't think of where we moved so many times.
Yeah. And along the way, during those years, you had 5 children, right? and 3 of them lived to adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
And the oldest was my mother, of course.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I think she told me that she was like 17 when you moved to Platteville.
Mm-hmm.
And then she met my father.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember when you met him for the first time?
I don't remember that.
Yeah. Do you remember Mom telling you that she was engaged?
Probably.
Yeah.
It's been a long
She
time.
was quite young then, though, wasn't she? She wasn't even out of high school then.
Mm-hmm.
How did you and Grandpa feel about her getting married that early?
I don't know. People that time got married when they were around 17, 18, or 19.
Uh-huh.
I guess we never thought none of it. He was in the service,
Yeah.
you know, and then she planned to join him later on, or she was working for a telephone company in Platteville, but when she got married, they wouldn't accept married women. Then she had to get a job at Madison. She lived there for a while till she went to Germany.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when she came back from Germany,
Yeah.
she had me.
Yeah. Well, you were born in Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right. Uh-huh.
And I was your first grandchild, is that right? I think I probably was.
I don't think so, because Martha had children.
No, you were Grandpa's first grandchild.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I guess that's right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I was only a few months old when they got back.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That must have been quite a day.
Yes, it was.
Uh-huh.
Hadn't seen her for 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Then you lived in Platteville, and then you had the house over on Stevens Street.
Yes, right.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
And
they
near,
dropped you off every morning
yeah.
and picked you up at night.
Mm-hmm.
Or was it 3.5 years?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You worked as a waitress at what cafe
Taylor's
downtown?
Cafe.
At Taylor's. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
How long did you work there?
Oh, maybe 5 years or so.
Uh-huh.
Besides, I worked at the country club.
Yeah.
That was my first job. I had about 3 days there, ladies' day and the men's night and weddings or whatever. But when I got through in the afternoon, then Howard Metcalf would take me down to Taylor's because I had to work from 2:30 to 8:30,
Wow.
6 days a week. But I was glad to get a job.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget the day that I walked in there and didn't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
I learned the hard way.
I remember getting those chocolate malts down there where they'd
Yeah.
have you'd fill up the glass and then have the big can besides.
Yeah, that's right. Uh-huh.
For a quarter.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Fred Taylor was so strict, and I remember I'd come to work at 2:30, and then a lot of men would come in for coffee, and then Fred Taylor would sit with them, and he said to me that one day, he says, "You shorted the man on this coffee," and I nearly died. Oh, he was so rude,
Uh-huh.
or dish out ice cream, and he'd say, "Sure, no wonder we're going bankrupt around here with you around." But then he'd turn right around and try to make up to you by fouling around for a half an hour. But I worked for him for a long time.
Uh-huh.
Then I quit and went down to Dick's, that new restaurant.
Yeah.
And Fred Taylor told me when I left, he said, "You gave me a full day's work." And I was going to say I had no choice. We weren't allowed to sit down at all.
No. Mm-hmm. Well, you've lived a very, very long and fruitful life.
Yeah.
As you look back on it, what do you think?
I don't know if I'd ever want to go through all that again. Oh my gosh. By the time he got a job, then Linda was born, and
Mm-hmm.
things were, got along real well.
Yeah.
And I remember when we got our new furniture, we lived in Janesville, and anyway, I got a rug, and I got 2 wicker chairs, and so forth. I couldn't wait till Dad come home to see that living room, because we hardly had anything in it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And finally we got a Davenport, and finally got a kerosene stove that had an oven to it, otherwise we had to put a kind of container on a burner
Mm-hmm.
and heat that, and that's how we would bake. But I remember that we got that new stove.
Mm-hmm.
And one time we got this real nice car, and I remember taking a ride in it. It seemed like the hood was a mile long. It was so rich. Oh my gosh.
Do you remember your first television set?
Yes, I do remember. I remember that we lived on the main street in Palmyra.
Mm-hmm.
And what station was it? And I could always hear that station, what they said it was, like, not WJTY, But it was a certain station. I was out in the kitchen when I heard that.
Yeah.
And, you know, Sandra and Linda and Denny, they were all gathered around. We had a TV, and then we had to have an antenna. And then my neighbor lady come over, and she had 2 kids that Denny used to play with. And anyway, I said, how about you getting a new television set? Oh, I don't want any television set. I don't want any. And that's the way she was. Well, sure enough, in a few more months, they had their TV. That was a great thing.
I bet you never could have imagined some of the things we have today, though, huh?
Oh my gosh. Poor for a long time. But the kids always had a good Christmas, and birthday parties I would give them where the kids would come, and the cake was all decorated, and Christmas I used to put stuff away months ahead of time so they'd have a good Christmas. And then they teased me about getting the tree up. Oh, I remember that. When are we going to put up the tree? When are we going to put up the tree? And then it was a big deal, getting the tree and trimming it. Oh my gosh. See, I never had Christmas at home or Easter. I never had that. So my kids had it. So then Dad would stoke the fire pretty good, so it'd be nice and warm when they got up in the morning. My folks didn't live too far away from me, so we had them over quite often for Christmas and New Year's and things like that.
Well, thanks very much for sharing this time with us.
Okay.
Someday your great-great-great-grandchildren will see this.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That'd be great. I got my first beautiful coat when we went to Janesville, and Dad bought me a coat with a fur collar. And I can still feel it. I sat in the front seat and all this fur around me. Oh my gosh.
It's a bar of juice, so we'll wait and see if the Dolphins are going to jump this morning. Ride. It's our first full day at sea, and everybody's having a wonderful time. It's 11 in the morning. A lot of folks were up early to work out in the fitness center. Sue is now down in the Taj Mahal, where she is having an orientation briefing on excursions. Here's the front of the ship as we head south along the Mexican Pacific coast. On the top deck, the sports deck, nice running track, about 100 yards long. Oval. By running here early this morning, there's basketball. And there's looking back aft. No sign of the kids as yet, or of Alan and his boys. Saw Mom and Dad and Brian and their family for breakfast just a little while ago down in the gift shop. Aft of the ship. Room for sun worshippers. All kinds of room. Looking to the north. Back forward. There's the stack. Right in front of that is the no cameras allowed sunbathing, topless optional area. Jogging track. There's a smaller one on the sports deck up above, and forward I should say. One lap is about 500 yards down here. This is the night of the great picture taking. Just done one with just done one with Mom and Dad and all of us. The daughters-in-law.
Not right. You know, I was just gonna say, that's perfect. Well, we can offer. That's right. Yes, that's right. It is nice. You're beautiful.
Oh, this is the casino here. As you can see, we got all kinds of things going on. have some important personages coming through. I think I recognize this guy. Over here.
I have to turn the camera off, so.
This is the big night of the anniversary dinner. There's the patriarch of the family in conversation with number 2 son, number 3 son, the various grandchildren and daughters-in-law.
Dave is in whale league as well.
The granddaughters are in fine form tonight. And there's the patriarch looking for something that can be gummed.
We were going to decide what the folks should get for their anniversary present. It was very difficult to get them anything because after 50 years, almost 70 years, living. His dad would say anything he's had in his life, he's either already had it or if he hasn't bought it by now, he doesn't want it. So the one thing we thought we'd have pictures taken and so forth. So what we decided, the one thing they would never have gotten himself was the present we think is too big to bring on the ship. It's going to be sent to you after you get home. You may recall last winter we took some photographs study for purposes for unexplained. So as this album, I also contacted a lot of members of your church, and they have sent me photographs and letters commemorating our anniversary of this album. The first thing in the album, we commissioned to have a portrait made. The painting itself is probably as big as this tape. So the others have seen it. They've already seen it. So we made a photograph of the painting that you have. And then the real painting will be sent to you after you get home, right to your house.
This turned out better than I thought.
Can we put a little more hair? Anyway, we thought you always have a photograph done by painting. You could probably not, you weren't going to be one to sit there. That's really good. On the dark, give me a little more hair.
That was better than I did when I was 18.
So you're not acting on the hair color, right?
I know my mother, the first time my mother saw Jim, she said, he is so handsome.
He's definitely going on.
Well, I was only 18. I don't know, maybe Irene.
As an artist, I met him.
Yeah. Just you guys being here, you just don't know what it means to me. And secondly, I don't have to cook, and Irene doesn't have to cook, and Sue doesn't have to cook. We have all these beautiful meals, but I want to thank my husband, Jim, your dad, because he suggested this way back last January when Alice and George were visiting us from Wisconsin, and Jim said he was thinking of the cruise, and I was just floored because I know Jim is a very generous man. He always thinks of everybody else first, and I know that because he would give anybody that he loves anything, and he doesn't think about himself. And I'm very happy to have him.
And then you got the bill and you were floored.
But I do know I have 3 of the most wonderful sons. Whenever I talk about my sons to anybody else, I'm very, very proud. And you don't know how proud I am of my daughters-in-law. I rave about you. And my grandchildren are just the best. I couldn't be happier about it. So you guys are really #1.
The painting itself is going to be
just one of the most incredible moments of their marriage, I think, that I think of all the families that never had a chance to gather like this, like we've been able to. So I thank my mom and dad for providing us this memorable opportunity. I don't think we'll ever forget this trip. I also want to say another thing. I'd like to just take a moment to remind us of my dad's parents, James and Leona Tyndall. Mom's parents, Alvin and Maida Carpenter. Maida Carpenter passed away this year. Our last grandparent. But I think they set the foundation of love and values and the way to live your life, and the way to love your family, love your family. What my mom said about my dad is very true. He would do anything for us. And I think he learned that from his parents, and my mom learned from her parents. So I'd like us to take a moment to remember the Tyndalls and the Carpenters.
Close it.
Amen.
the type of work that I do, and usually deals with the failures of relationships. And I can say is great expert is the rarity of for someone to a couple to be married 50 years in our society now is something that's a lost art. It's a dying generation of people. I mean, very few people sitting around the table here are people our age that are ever going to be able to reach that point. So it reflects the values of generations of people. Our grandparents were married over 50 and 40 years apiece. My parents, it's 150 years of three family couples being married. So there's a lot to reflect on. As younger people particularly will go on and have their own relationships. I hope that you can look to these people as examples of what to do in a relationship. One of the reflections that I can see that the core of mom and dad's marriage has been their faith in Jesus Christ. And I remember a few years ago when I graduated from law school, my mom took the boys out for a walk by themselves, and I was with Dad by himself, and I asked him if he was going to live his life again, would he have lived it the same way? And he said he probably would have. He would have perhaps taken more risks in his life. I asked him if he would have married the same person again. And he said he would have, without hesitation, he said he would have done that. I also know that Dad had said that probably the one thing that he had regretted in his life is that he hadn't committed himself as a Christian much earlier in his life than he perhaps did. And I sort of marked that time from when, after Dad's father had died, and I saw a real change myself in Dad's life. My mother had always been far more constant in her faith than perhaps Dad had been, but since he has come to an act of faith, the parents have gone and traveled around the world saving people's souls, and the reunion in heaven is going to be far greater than this. The people that they've touched and had their brought to Christ had their chance to live eternally because of what Mom and Dad have done all over the world. So particularly, if you have Christ at the center of your relationship, you're guaranteed to have success. And it's not guaranteed that you won't have setbacks and disappointments in your life. There will be many. But Christ is the bond and the bridge between two people, and through them, through all sorts of other people that they know, their friends and family. And so we all reflect in that. And particularly for myself, my own belief in Christ and faith in Christ has come directly affected by my parents' example and by their prayers for me and by their dedication and trust in me, even when I was living my life in a way that was probably quite a bit astray from what they were wanting me to do. So, especially this time of Christmas when we celebrate this birth of the Savior, what He's done for us, I'm incredibly grateful that He's given me the parents we have. It's Dave and Brian and I never have asked for a better upbringing than we have. So,
Thank you, Brian.
We can eat now.
Eat your soup before it gets cold.
I certainly appreciate the way you feel, and I know how you feel. But what I will tell you is that it took me a number of years to realize why I'm on this earth. I'm not just here by accident. I didn't fall out some flying someplace and go off. You're here for a purpose. The Lord put you here for a purpose. Your life is going to be a better life, and you're going to make other people's lives a better life. Believe that and follow that. I'm convinced of that. My life would have been even better had I done that at a younger age. So if I can say that my children and my grandchildren know Jesus Christ as their personal Savior, then my whole life will be good.
Amen.
start. Gonna do friends.
Did it all on my roots. I showed up in boots and ruined your black tie affair. The last one to know, the last one to show. I was the last one you thought you'd see there. And I saw the surprise and I fear in his eyes when I took his glass of champagne. I toasted you, said, honey, we may be through, but you'll never hear me complain. 'Cause I got friends in low places where the whiskey grounds and the beer chases my blues away. Yeah, well, I'm not big on social graces. Think I'll slip on down to the oasis, so I got friends in low places. Well, I guess I was wrong. I just don't belong. But then I've been there before. Everything is alright. I'll just say goodnight and I'll show myself to the door. Yeah, I didn't mean to cause a big scene. Just give me an hour and then well, I'll be as high as that ivory tower that you're living in. 'Cause I've got friends in low places where the whiskey drowns and the beer chases my blues away. And I'll be okay. Yeah, I'm not big on social graces. Think I'll slip on down to the oasis, so I got friends in low places. All right, Carlos, we need to hear you. I got friends in low places where the whiskey rounds and the beer chases my blues away. And I'll be okay. I'm not big on social graces. Think I'll slip on down to the oasis, so I got friends in low places. One more time, Jim. I got friends in low places where the whiskey drowns and the beer chases my blues away. And I'll be okay. I'm not big on social graces. Think I'll slip on down to the oasis, so I got friends in more places.
Thank you very much, Joe. Lucinda.
There to your left there, partner.
Anybody from Chicago?
This is my kind of town. Chicago is my kind of town. Chicago is my kind of people. in like a clown. It's my kind of town. My kind of town, Chicago is. My kind of town, Chicago is. My kind of grass is tan, and it has all that jazz, and each time I leave Chicago is hugging my sweet Chicago is. Glory, great building, Chicago is. The Union Stockyard, Chicago is. One town that won't let you down. It's my kind of town.
Mike, maybe lost. Hope it's not the end. I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces all day through. In that small cafe, the park across the way, the children's carousel, the chestnut trees, the wishing well, and I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's light and day. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is young, I'll be looking at you, but I'll be seeing you. My eyes aren't even blue. Are they? And I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is through, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you. I'll find you in the sun, and when the night is through, I'll be looking at the moon. I'll be looking at the moon, and I'll be seeing you. Okay.
Okay, what's going on with Team Red out there? You guys have not had one singer tonight. Is there anybody on Team Red in the room?
Down in front. cool sweat. Relax, get hip, and get on my tracks. Take a back seat and hitchhike, and take a long, long ride on my motorbike until I'm ready for a crazy little thing called Hey, got a joke for everyone. Why is Santa so jolly this holiday season? Because he knows where all the naughty girls live. Yeah! I gotta be cool, relax, and get hip, and get on my tracks. Take a back seat, and get out, and take a long, long ride on my motorbike until I'm ready. Breaks a little thing called this thing. I just can't handle it. This thing. I must get around to it. Ain't ready. Crazy little thing called. 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 Crazy little thing called.
Oh, did she go to the toilet?
Grandma missed it.
Hello, baby. Here's my big mama speaker. Oh, you sweet thing. You are what? You are what? Oh, baby, you know what I like. Chantilly lace and a pretty face and a ponytail hanging down. Wiggling, walking, giggling, talk. Make the world go round. Ain't no little world like big eyed girl. Make it feel so funny. Spend my money like see you real loose like an all that girls like me. Oh, baby, that's what I like. What's that, baby? But, oh, honey. But, oh, baby, you know what I like. Chantilly lace and a pretty face and a ponytail hanging down. A giggling walk and a giggling talk. Oh, make the world go round, round, round. Ain't nothing in the world like a big-eyed girl. That's so funny. Make me spend my money. Make me feel real loose like a long neck goose like a girl. Oh, baby, that's what I like. What's that, honey?